What's up, metalheads? My name's Jamie. This is the Blades and EDC channel. Thank you guys so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. If you're new, please consider subscribing, and if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button for me. Alright guys, today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to compare the Demco Shark Lock to the Sandrin Recoil Lock. And I'm basically going to take a scale off of each of these and show you the inside and how they function. A lot of you may have already seen how the Shark Lock works, but we'll go ahead and take it apart in case someone out there hasn't seen. Just first thing, before you disassemble either of these knives, you should be aware they both have a spring in them. So be cautious. If you lose it and not find it, then you've got a useless knife. So be aware of that. Let's bring out my disassembly mat here. And grab us the good screw and some bits. We'll do the Demco first. T10 on the pivot, that's right. T10 on the pivot for the AD20. I think it's T6 on the body screws. Yes. So we'll go ahead and open this one up first. I'll leave the liner on so the spring won't pop out until I get the other one apart. And then we'll go from there. Alright. These are not that difficult to work on. Pretty easy to take apart and reassemble. Just, you just want to be aware that a spring could go flying, so. Alright. And I do have disassembly videos for the AD20.5 already, if you haven't seen them yet, before I install scales and things on them. Like I've installed these original goat scales, or these fat carbon scales on this one. Alright, we're going to leave the liner on there because the liner is going to keep that spring in place till we're ready to open it up. Okay. Got a T8 and T6s. Okay, those are different size screws, so I want to keep those in order from the butt of the knife on up. I don't think this one has a liner over the spring. We're about to find out. That pivot was really loose. Spring came out. I saw it. It's still in there though. Didn't go flying on me, luckily. We'll put it back. Definitely got some lube on the lock there. This one has a little notch in there to hold the spring in, as you can see right there. There we go. Back in there. Alright. So, since I got this part, I'll go ahead and lube it up, clean it. This one hasn't been disassembled. This one's fairly clean. It haven't used it much. Oh, that spring came out too, but luckily I caught it. Haven't used it much since I installed the scale, so it's not going to be dirty on the inside. But there you go. So with the Shark Lock, get the spring back in there. I'll show you how it functions. And hopefully the spring won't go flying on me. So with the Shark Lock, I'm going to keep my finger over that spring. When it's closed, the spring's always going to push this forward, right? And when you open it, it's pushing that spring back, bringing that blade around, and that spring's going to push it back and lock it in right there. And that's super strong lockup, right? And to disengage the lock, you just pull back, compress that spring, and it lets the blade clear. And then on the close, the spring's still pushing, so once it passes this point right here on the blade, it almost assists the closing. It does assist in the closing, which is pretty cool. Now the recoil lock, and the recoil, they call this the recoil lock, but they do credit Snex. They say it's a Snex inspired lock. This one doesn't appear nearly as strong with what you've got here, right? Works the same. You pull it back and it lets that blade come through. And then when it comes back to the close, there's a little notch right there in the blade that locks it, acts as a detent basically. But when you look at what's holding this knife in place, how little there actually is there. There's very little contact there. Tiny little piece is all there holding that blade. I'm not going to say it's a bad thing or not a safe thing, but you know, it definitely is not nearly as beefy as a shark lock is. The shark lock is much more beefy and going to be a much stronger lock than the recoil lock. Go ahead and take this off, because I'm going to clean this real quick. Hopefully that won't fly off on me. We'll face it down. Clean these bearings too. We'll put it down like that so that spring can't go flying on us. So very interesting. I find it amazing to people that engineer this stuff and think it up in their head and draw it out and bring it to the market for everyone to enjoy. This one right here is such a strong lock. I mean, this thing is locked up like Fort Knox. This one, not so much. Not nearly as stout of a locking mechanism. Although they work very similar, the way they function, but they are definitely not equals when it comes to, sturdiness. This one is actually surprising how little and how thin that metal right there is that is locking your blade open. Not a whole lot there, really. I'm sure they've done lots of testing and they use a special kind of steel there so that it doesn't bend, and it's not, also it doesn't break. It's not overly hard to where that piece could break off, because it is pretty thin. And I've never heard of anyone saying one of these broke, but it would not surprise me if somebody was really beating on this knife hard, if that could chip, if that could break off right there and could get you hurt, or at the very least ruin your knife. Alright, put a little bit of this on here. It's amazing how heavy tungsten carbide is. For how thin that blade is, it's so heavy. It's heavy. It's going to be heavier than that big blade. Get a little more lube on there. So, fairly interesting designs. And there's no doubt in my mind which one is the stronger lock. Just from looking at it, it's pretty obvious, right? So little. I'm surprised how little. It's the first time I've disassembled this knife, so I expected it to be a little beefier in there than it actually is. Got a nice giant stop pin in there, though. Big beefy stop pin, that's for sure. Go ahead and put a little lube on that washer. Alright, let's put it back together. This stop pin does not feel like it's in there properly. Ah, damn it. Let's put the stop pin down on this side first. Yeah, very thin. Is that steel? Yeah, it's steel. I wouldn't think it'd be aluminum. It'd be way too soft for what it is. Definitely don't want to get any oil on that part. It would cause lock stick, I would assume. And you see the little notch, a little nipple right there. That one, that helps lock the spring in place on this one. The Shark Lock doesn't have that. It's just kind of free floating in there. I should put this over top of that. Actually, I'm looking at that spring. It looks like it could pop out at any time. right in there. There you go. Be easier to do this without the pocket clip on it. It wouldn't be try to move around as much. Maybe a better idea to do it with the blade closed also. There we go. We back together. Yeah, I thought y'all would find that interesting if any of you guys that haven't ever seen these apart. Pretty cool to see how things work. Little screw goes there. Big screw goes there. You know, when you think about it, you look at the blade that's on this knife, the tungsten carbide. It's like 71 HRC, I believe, tungsten carbide is on this knife, which will make it hold an edge literally for years. And but then you look at how thin this is, the thing that's actually responsible for your safety and keeping you, from cutting yourself, from lock filling. There's not a whole lot there on this knife, really. Very easy to take apart and work on, though. Go ahead and tighten that pivot down just a hair more. We are already pretty much dead centered, but let's give it a tiny turn there. Yeah, there we go. So that is the recoil lock by Sander Knives. They make a lot of several knives, like 4 models, I think, 5 models. They all use the recoil lock. They got one called the Forza, or maybe it's called something else, but it's titanium, or you can get it with zirconium scales, and it uses this recoil lock also. Shark lock is definitely a much beefier lock. There's no doubt about that. Honestly, they're not even comparable to each other. I would trust this knife much more than that knife over a long-term period or hard use. There's no doubt in my mind this lock's going to hold up, right? I don't think this lock would ever fail on you. That one, this one here, the Torino, I'm not so sure about now that I've looked at it. Surprised, really surprised how thin that little piece of metal is. All right. Screws spinning on the other side. No, it's not. There we go. I really like the way this raw aluminum is getting the patina on it. I was worried. I was like, I knew it wouldn't stay shiny, but I wasn't sure how it would patina or how it would look, and it's like turning white, which I think looks really cool. Very different looking than titanium. Something different, in a good way. Yeah, that one's free spinning on the other side. That's all right. All right. We already look pretty damn centered. A little too tight. There we go. Dead nut centered. Dead nut centered. Two two similar knives that are actually extremely different, if that makes sense. I thought they would look more alike than they actually do in there. I just assumed that that recoil lock was going to be much more like the Shark lock than it actually is. Now, I've never disassembled a Snex lock before, but like I said, Torino credits Snex for their recoil lock. They say that it isn't, that their lock is inspired by Snex, so they give him credit. But two knives that have similar locking systems, but they are entirely different at the same time. And clearly one is going to be a much better lock than the other long term or for hard use. So this one may have a much better blade because it's tungsten carbide and will hold up forever. But I can't say I feel the same way about the lock. I could be wrong, you know. Maybe the way that steel is done, I don't know what that steel is made of. Maybe whatever they've used to make that will last a lifetime. I don't know. But I know that lock will last a lifetime. There's no doubt in my mind. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And I'll see you on the next one.